You know what's interesting about motorcycle riders? Non-riders almost never get it right. They say it's about the speed, the danger, the image. But psychology tells a completely different story. What looks like recklessness from the outside is almost always something much quieter on the inside, something most people spend their whole lives searching for and never quite find. And it shows up in 5 very specific things that riders understand deeply, things that the rest of the world either misses entirely or gets completely backwards. Here are 5 things motorcycle riders understand that most people don't, and why psychology says these aren't accidents. Stick around for number 4. It's the one most riders have felt 100 times but never have the right words for.
Sign 1. Real quiet is something you have to earn. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. The moment things go still, they reach for the phone, turn on the TV, put on a podcast, something, anything. Not riders. On a motorcycle, there's no radio, no notifications, no background noise to disappear into. Just the engine, the road, and whatever's actually going on in your head. And here's what's interesting. Riders don't just put up with that. They look for it. In 2021, UCLA researchers funded by Harley-Davidson measured what actually happens in the brain during a ride. They found a 28% drop in cortisol, that's the main stress hormone, after just 20 minutes on a bike. Brain scans showed increased alertness and sensory focus, not numbness, not tuning out, the opposite. Psychologists call this a flow state. It's what happens when an activity is demanding enough to hold your full attention, but not so overwhelming that it shuts you down. The mind stops jumping from one thing to the next and finally locks in on a single point. The bike creates that almost automatically. It demands everything from you. And in return, it hands back a kind of quiet that most people have never actually felt. Real silence isn't the absence of noise. It's when your own mind finally stops talking. Riders know what that feels like. Most people are still looking for it. Sign 2. Fear and danger are not the same thing. Ask most people why they don't ride, and at some point they'll say it, "I'd be too scared." And they're not wrong to say that. Riding is genuinely risky. But what they're describing isn't really what goes on in a rider's head. Riders are afraid of things too. They just learn to do something different with that fear. Psychologists call it risk calibration. It's the ability to look at a situation, separate what's actually dangerous from what just feels dangerous, and make a clear decision based on that read, not just based on the feeling alone. Research on motorcycle riders consistently shows higher than average scores on what's called harm assessment, the mental process of judging real risk accurately, not just reacting to the gut feeling of fear. Riders develop this because the road constantly demands it. Lane position, speed, road surface, the driver 2 cars ahead who hasn't checked their mirrors once. Every ride is dozens of small judgment calls per minute. Do that enough times and something shifts. A quiet confidence starts to build. Not the loud kind that comes from ignoring danger, the real kind that comes from facing it so many times that it stops making all your decisions for you. It's not that riders don't feel fear, it's that they've practiced being afraid and still thinking clearly, more times than most people ever have. And that skill doesn't stay on the bike, it goes everywhere. Sign 3. Letting go is a skill, and the road teaches it fast. Here's something non-riders almost never think about. On a motorcycle, you are completely exposed. There is no door between you and whatever happens next. You cannot control the driver who drifts into your lane. You cannot control what's around the next bend. You cannot control the weather that rolls in an hour into a 4-hour ride. Most people spend a huge amount of mental energy trying to control things that were never really in their hands. Riders can't afford to do that. The bike teaches a different lesson, early, and it teaches it fast. Psychologists call it psychological flexibility, the ability to stay functional and focused even when things around you are uncertain and out of your control. It's one of the strongest predictors of long-term mental health, and research shows it's something most people have to work hard to build deliberately. Riders develop it by default, because when you're on a bike, the only real option you have is to control what's actually yours: your attention, your judgment, your speed, your line through the corner. Everything else you let go of. Not because you're giving up, because holding on to it would get you killed. Most people understand that idea in theory. They've heard it in some form 100 times. Let go of what you can't control. Riders understand it in their body. There's a real difference between knowing something and having learned it at speed, in the wind, with the road moving under you. Think about what we've covered so far. Someone who has learned what real mental quiet feels like. Someone who has trained themselves to think clearly under pressure. Someone who has developed a genuine ability to let go of what they can't control. From the outside, people call them reckless, but look at what they've actually built. Sign 4. A stranger's nod can say more than a conversation. This is the one most riders feel but almost never explain out loud. You pull up to a gas station somewhere in the middle of nowhere. A rider on a completely different bike, wearing different gear, coming from a direction you've never even been, pulls up next to you. You've never met. You know nothing about each other. And then one of you nods, and the other nods back. And somehow, in a world full of people who can't agree on anything, that's completely enough. No names, no backstory, no conversation required. Most people spend years trying to find a place where they belong, where they don't have to explain themselves, where someone just gets it without needing the full story. Riders stumble into that by getting on a bike. Psychologists who study human connection call this experiential bonding, connections built not on shared backgrounds or similar opinions, but on shared experience, on having both been through something that the other person understands without explanation. Research consistently shows that this kind of bond forms faster and often runs deeper than connections built through years of ordinary interaction. The wave between riders isn't a tradition that somebody made up, it's recognition. Two people who both know something that words don't cover well. Something about the road and risk and the particular feeling of being fully alive in a moment that demands everything you've got. That nod is shorthand for all of it, and that silent moment of being understood without having to say a word is something most people search their entire lives for and only find in fragments. Sign 5. The ride doesn't fix your problems, it fixes you. Riders don't always know how to explain why they go out when things get bad. They just know they come back different. The job was terrible this week. The argument at home is still sitting there. The decision that's been following them around for 3 weeks hasn't gone anywhere. But they get on the bike, and something changes. Psychologists call this active stress regulation, using a physical, focused activity to reset the nervous system when it's stuck or overwhelmed. What makes riding different from most activities that claim to do this is what researchers describe as total attentional demand. A motorcycle doesn't give your mind room to wander, it takes the whole foreground. Speed, road, traffic, lean angle, throttle. Your brain cannot genuinely spiral about a work email and process all of that at the same time, so everything else gets pushed to the back. And somewhere in the middle of all that road and wind and noise, the problem that felt enormous an hour ago starts to look like its actual size. This isn't escapism. Escapism is avoiding the thing. What riding does is closer to a reset. You come back to the exact same problem, but you come back with more room around it, more perspective, a clearer head. Non-riders sometimes think going for a ride is running away from something. Riders know they're actually riding toward themselves. And maybe that's what ties all 5 of these together. From the outside, motorcycling looks like a hobby, something people do on weekends, a lifestyle choice that other people quietly worry about. But from the inside, it's something closer to a practice, a way of learning things that are genuinely hard to learn anywhere else. how to stay calm under pressure, how to be alone without being lonely, how to belong somewhere without having to explain who you are, how to let go of what you can't hold. Riders aren't chasing the thrill, they're chasing something most people want but very few ever figure out how to find: the feeling of being fully present, fully clear, and completely alive in a moment that asks everything of you.